The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, issued an office memorandum on the 29th of October 2025, outlining a rationalized framework for green belt development in industrial estates and individual industries. This initiative seeks to harmonize environmental sustainability with industrial growth by adopting a more flexible, pollution-based approach rather than rigid uniform norms. The new framework introduces differentiated green belt requirements depending on the pollution potential, category, and available land area of industries. High pollution industries are mandated to maintain wider green buffers with dense native vegetation, while low pollution units can adopt vertical greening, rooftop gardens, or off-site compensatory plantations. This shift recognizes spatial limitations in existing estates and encourages scientifically designed, outcome-based green infrastructure. Further, industrial parks are urged to integrate green corridors, biodiversity zones, and climate-resilient landscape planning to enhance air quality, mitigate heat islands, and support ecological restoration. The memorandum aligns with India's broader sustainability goals and circular economy agenda by embedding environmental safeguards into industrial design and operation. Overall, it marks a progressive step toward balancing developmental imperatives with ecological stewardship, promoting both regulatory clarity and environmental accountability across the industrial landscape. Slide 2. Evolution of Green Belt Policy Framework. The evolution of India's Green Belt Policy Framework reflects a progressive shift from prescriptive norms to a more scientific and context-driven approach to environmental management. Under the EIA notification, 2006, obtaining prior environmental clearance, (EC), became mandatory for industrial projects and activities, with green belt development emerging as a key mitigation measure to control air pollution, improve microclimatic conditions, and promote ecological balance. Between 2018 and 2020, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, issued several office memoranda standardizing EC conditions, stipulating that industries should allocate 33% of project land for green belt development, thereby creating a benchmark for environmental restoration across sectors. A pivotal policy revision took place on the 31st of October 2019, when the MoEFCC introduced differentiated green belt norms based on the pollution potential of industries. For projects located in critically polluted areas, CPA, and severely polluted areas, SPA, the green belt requirement was tightened to mitigate cumulative impacts. These measures were guided by the Honorable NGT's order dated the 28th of April 2011 in OA No. 1038/2018, emphasizing the need for region-specific environmental safeguards. Complementing these reforms, the Central Pollution Control Board, CPCB, earlier in March 2000 had issued guidelines for green belt design and specifications, including plant species selection, width, and density. However, with changing industrial geographies and land constraints, these guidelines evolved toward performance-based standards, allowing flexibility in achieving equivalent ecological outcomes through compensatory and vertical greening. This policy evolution signifies India's transition from generic compliance frameworks to evidence-based green infrastructure planning, aligning environmental policy with sustainable industrialization, urban resilience, and climate action objectives under the National Green Growth Agenda. Slide 3. Committee Recommendations and Expert Review. To address inconsistencies in the implementation of green belt requirements across industrial sectors, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, constituted a specialized committee to rationalize and standardize guidelines for green belt development. The committee's mandate was to create a balanced framework aligning environmental safeguards with industrial feasibility while promoting sustainable land use practices. The committee undertook an extensive review of existing norms, previous office memoranda, and state-level environmental clearance conditions. It recognized that rigid percentage-based requirements often conflicted with land availability and industrial layout constraints, particularly in dense industrial estates. Hence, it recommended a graded approach to green belt development, linking the extent and design of green cover to the pollution potential of industries, spatial configuration, and regional ecological sensitivity. The recommendations were subsequently examined by the Expert Advisory Committee, EAC, which undertook a comprehensive technical review. The EAC emphasized the need for scientifically planned green belts that maximize environmental outcomes, such as air pollutant attenuation, noise reduction, biodiversity conservation, and microclimate regulation. It further stressed adopting native species, multi-tier planting systems, and compensatory greening options where on-site land is limited. Following detailed deliberations, the EAC endorsed the committee's proposal, suggesting its integration into the environmental clearance process to ensure uniform application across industrial sectors. Based on these expert recommendations, the ministry issued new rationalized guidelines on the 29th of October 2025, superseding earlier directives, including the OM dated the 27th of October 2020. These updated norms aim to establish a more realistic, performance-oriented, and ecologically effective framework for green belt development, ensuring that industrial growth proceeds in harmony with environmental preservation and national sustainability objectives. Slide 4. Revised Green Belt Norms for Industrial Estates and Parks. The revised Green Belt Norms for Industrial Estates and Parks, introduced under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change's 2025 memorandum, represent a balanced approach to sustainable industrial development. The updated framework aims to optimize green cover in industrial estates by linking plantation requirements to land availability, pollution potential, and spatial configuration rather than imposing uniform mandates. Under the revised norms, a minimum of 10% of the total industrial estate area must be designated as a common green area. This includes open spaces, peripheral plantations, and landscaped buffers, with a plantation density of 2,500 trees per hectare. These common green areas are to be developed and maintained by the Industrial Estate Authority, ensuring collective ecological benefits such as air pollution mitigation, temperature regulation, and biodiversity enhancement. For individual member industries located within these estates, green belt requirements are now differentiated based on pollution potential categories, ranging from 15% for red category industries to optional coverage for green and white category units. This categorization encourages equitable responsibility, where higher emission industries contribute proportionately to environmental offsets. Moreover, the revised policy allows flexibility for off-site or compensatory plantations where land constraints exist, enabling proponents to achieve or exceed minimum greening criteria through innovative approaches like vertical gardens, roadside plantations, or degraded land restoration. The green belt should be located as close as possible to the pollution source to maximize effectiveness in pollutant absorption and noise attenuation. These reforms modernize India's industrial environmental standards by promoting a science-based, flexible, and outcome-oriented model for green infrastructure development. They not only strengthen ecological resilience within industrial zones but also align with the nation's broader vision of low-carbon and climate-resilient industrial growth. Slide 5. Category-wise Green Belt Requirements within Industrial Estates. The revised framework for category-wise Green Belt requirements within industrial estates, as outlined by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, introduces a differentiated and pragmatic approach to environmental management. It categorizes industries based on their pollution potential, red, orange, green, and white, and prescribes corresponding green belt obligations to ensure proportional environmental responsibility. For the red category, representing high pollution potential industries such as heavy manufacturing, chemicals, or metallurgical operations, a minimum of 15% green belt area within individual unit premises is mandatory. These units are also required to adopt strict environmental control systems, ensuring effective mitigation of emissions and improvement in ambient air quality through dense native vegetation. The orange category includes moderately polluting industries, such as food processing or light engineering units. These establishments must maintain a minimum 10% green belt within their premises, contributing to localized air purification, noise reduction, and aesthetic enhancement while maintaining operational efficiency. The green category covers low pollution potential industries, which are encouraged, but not mandated, to develop green belts within available spaces. The emphasis is on voluntary participation, promoting sustainability through eco-conscious practices and employee engagement in greening initiatives. Finally, the white category, comprising non-polluting or negligible polluting sectors like IT parks or assembly units, faces no mandatory green belt requirement. However, they are encouraged to undertake optional green cover as part of corporate environmental responsibility or landscape beautification efforts. This category-wise system replaces uniform compliance norms with a scientifically graded structure, ensuring that industrial estates collectively contribute to environmental enhancement while maintaining economic feasibility. It reflects a policy evolution towards performance-based environmental governance, aligning industrial development with India's broader commitments to sustainable growth and climate resilience. Industrial units located outside notified industrial estates are required to adopt specific green belt measures as part of environmental safeguards mandated under Environmental Clearance Act. These requirements are determined based on recommendations of the National Expert Appraisal Committee (EAC) or state-level EACs, which evaluate pollution potential and prescribe appropriate mitigation. The National EAC seeks classify industries into differentiated pollution categories to ensure proportionate ecological compensation and impact reduction. Red category units, which largely fall under predominantly air-polluting sectors with an air pollution score, PEA, above 40, must allocate at least 25% of their total area to green belt development. Since these activities pose significant particulate and gaseous emission risks, dense plantation buffers help absorb pollutants, suppress dust, minimize noise, and improve local microclimate. Other industries under this category must still provide a minimum of 20% green belt, underscoring the emphasis on stringent emission control. Orange category industries, which exhibit moderate air pollution potential with a PEA score between 25 and 40, are obligated to develop 20 to 25% green belt coverage. Other sectors in this category with lower air-based impacts are required to reserve a minimum of 15% green belt area. This balanced approach ensures ecological compensation proportional to pollution load. Green category units, with a PEA score below 25, have a relatively minor emission footprint and are therefore required to develop 10% green belt, which may also be considered optional depending on site-specific conditions and committee recommendations. White category industries, which are considered non-polluting, have no mandatory green belt requirement, reflecting their negligible environmental impact. These graded norms ensure that industries outside estates, often located near settlements, agricultural land or ecologically sensitive areas, maintain plantation barriers for carbon sequestration, air purification, biodiversity support, and landscape restoration. The framework ultimately aligns industrial growth with environmental sustainability and public health protection. Slide 7. Generic Directions for Green Belt Development. The generic directions for Green Belt Development, as outlined in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, Memorandum, 2025, provide an integrated framework for establishing, maintaining, and monitoring green belts across industrial projects. These directions are designed to ensure consistency, adaptability, and long-term ecological effectiveness across both new and existing industrial establishments. For brownfield projects involving modernization, capacity expansion, or product diversification, the revised norms require expert appraisal committees, EACs, to assess site-specific feasibility and environmental impact before recommending appropriate green belt coverage. This approach encourages optimal land use while accommodating operational constraints. In terms of prospective application, the new norms are applicable to all forthcoming projects seeking environmental clearance, (EC). This ensures uniform adoption of sustainable landscaping and afforestation practices during project design and execution phases. The maintenance responsibility rests with the project proponent, who must ensure proper nurturing and protection of plantations for a minimum of 5 years post-establishment. This measure secures vegetation maturity and sustains long-term ecological benefits from industrial green investments. The framework also promotes ex situ plantation, allowing proponents to offset green belt obligations through afforestation on alternate lands in collaboration with local authorities, urban local bodies, ULBs, or through schemes such as compensatory afforestation and Nagar One Yojana. Additionally, the guidelines provide optional provisions for low pollution or white category industries, encouraging voluntary green development beyond mandatory requirements. These measures enhance biodiversity, improve air quality, and contribute to community well-being. Overall, the generic directions mark a shift toward scientific, performance-based green infrastructure, integrating flexibility with accountability. They align industrial environmental management with India's national objectives on sustainable development, carbon neutrality, and nature-positive growth. Slide 8. Special provisions for critically and severely polluted areas. The special provisions for critically and severely polluted areas, CPAs and SPAs, introduced by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, in 2025 reinforce India's commitment to intensive environmental restoration in high-impact industrial zones. These guidelines mandate a minimum of 40% green belt development within the premises of industries falling under red and orange categories located in such areas, in accordance with the Mechanism for Environmental Management of Critically and Severely Polluted Areas. This enhanced requirement aligns with the directives of the Honorable National Green Tribunal, NGT, order dated the 23rd of August 2019 in the matter of OA No. 1038/2018, which underscored the urgent necessity for stronger ecological safeguards in regions facing high cumulative pollution loads. It also builds upon the Office Memorandum dated the 31st of October 2019, ensuring a robust compliance framework to address local environmental degradation. The provision acknowledges that CPAs and SPAs experience elevated concentrations of air, water, and soil pollutants due to industrial clustering, inadequate assimilative capacity, and limited green buffers. Therefore, requiring 40% green cover serves as a compensatory and preventive measure, enhancing pollutant absorption, moderating ambient temperature, improving microclimatic stability, and supporting biodiversity regeneration. Furthermore, the guidelines emphasize native and pollution-tolerant species for plantation to maximize ecological resilience. Industries in these zones are encouraged to integrate the green belt with stormwater management systems, carbon sequestration corridors, and ecological parks for long-term sustainability. Slide 9. Enhancing green belt effectiveness, technical specifications. The technical specifications for enhancing green belt effectiveness serve as a comprehensive guideline for improving the ecological performance and functional efficiency of industrial green belts. Selection of species is central to the framework, recommending the use of native and pollution-tolerant plants with proven absorption capacity for dust, gases, and particulates. Multi-layered vegetation comprising trees, shrubs, and ground cover species ensures year-round effectiveness, structural diversity, and ecological balance. In terms of design and structure, the guidelines advocate a multi-tier plantation model with species arranged based on height, canopy spread, and leaf density to optimize pollutant interception. Proper spacing and density management enhance the aerodynamic resistance required to trap airborne pollutants. Orientation and placement are critical for maximizing protective benefits. Green belts should be located along predominant wind directions and pollution sources such as chimneys, roads, and effluent outlets, serving as natural barriers that absorb and deflect emissions. For soil and water management, the framework advises site-specific interventions, including organic soil enrichment, rainwater harvesting, and irrigation systems to maintain plant vitality and growth. Maintenance measures mandate regular monitoring, pruning, replantation, and record-keeping, with industries required to allocate resources for at least 5 years to ensure green belt maturity and effectiveness. The monitoring and evaluation process includes periodic assessments of vegetation density, canopy cover, and pollutant absorption efficiency through standardized indicators. Finally, the guidelines stress integration with broader environmental planning, linking green belts with water bodies, biodiversity corridors, and open spaces to reinforce ecological connectivity. Collectively, these technical measures transform green belts into dynamic environmental assets, vital for industrial sustainability and climate resilience. Slide 10. Monitoring Mechanism and Compliance Framework. The Monitoring Mechanism and Compliance Framework introduced by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, establishes a structured approach to ensure effective implementation, maintenance, and verification of green belt development across industrial estates and individual industrial units. This framework reinforces accountability, data transparency, and continuous environmental performance improvement. Under industrial estate reporting, estate authorities are required to submit half-yearly progress reports to the State Pollution Control Board, SPCB, Pollution Control Committee, PCC, and the Integrated Regional Office, IRO, of MoEFCC. These reports must include detailed information on the total plantation area, number of living trees, survival rates, and maintenance activities. Such systematic reporting enables ongoing oversight of a state-wide greening initiatives and supports data-driven policy adjustments. For individual unit reporting, standalone industries must submit self-assessment reports outlining the extent of green belt developed, types of plant species used, survival percentages, and related environmental metrics. These reports must be verified by SPCBs, PCCs to ensure compliance with approved environmental clearance, (EC) conditions and sector-specific pollution norms. The verification process is a critical component of the compliance structure. Green belts established by industrial estates and individual industries are subject to third-party audits conducted by recognized agencies, ensuring impartial evaluation of plantation quality and survival outcomes. Verification results are then validated by SPCB-PCC, forming the basis for continued compliance certification. This monitoring mechanism, issued under the Office Memorandum dated the 29th of October 2025, supersedes earlier directives, OM dated the 27th of October 2020, establishing a uniform national framework for green belt assessment. By integrating systematic reporting, independent verification, and digital documentation, it promotes transparency, ecological accountability, and continuous improvement in industrial environmental management across India. Slide 11. Key stakeholders and implementation. The successful implementation of the revised Green Belt Policy Framework relies on the coordinated efforts of multiple stakeholders across central and state levels. This multi-tiered governance structure ensures uniform application, efficient monitoring, and integration of environmental safeguards into industrial planning and operation. At the central level, the key authorities include the Chairman of the Central Pollution Control Board, CPCB, the Chairperson of all Expert Appraisal Committees, EACs, and senior officials of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, including the Integrated Regional Offices, IROs, and the Member Secretary of MoEFCC. These bodies are primarily responsible for formulating guidelines, setting national standards, reviewing compliance reports, and facilitating interagency coordination for effective policy enforcement. At the state level, implementation is overseen by the chairpersons and member secretaries of State Environmental Impact Assessment Authorities, SEIAs, State Expert Appraisal Committees, SEACs, and State Pollution Control Boards, SPCBs. These authorities play a crucial role in ensuring that industrial projects adhere to Green Belt development requirements as part of their environmental clearance (EC) conditions. Additionally, Union Territory Pollution Control Committees, UTPCCs, extend similar functions in union territories, ensuring regional consistency in execution. This collaborative framework ensures that environmental planning is not confined to compliance alone but integrated into the core of industrial development. By aligning central oversight with state-level implementation, the framework creates an ecosystem for adaptive governance, transparency, and accountability. The revised directions mark a significant step towards sustainable industrial growth, balancing pollution mitigation with development needs. Through coordinated participation of all stakeholders, India strengthens its commitment to climate-resilient industrialization and long-term ecological stewardship. Thanks for listening and hope that it will be adopted and implemented accordingly.